In Bryant Park, I found my son seated on a bench with my grandson and 3 suitcases holding everything he owned. I asked him why he wasn't at the office. He kept his eyes down and said he'd been fired. His father-in-law had told him, "Our blood doesn't mix with people like you." I smiled, not with happiness, but with something far colder. Get in the car. That night, the man who believed he controlled the board was about to learn who truly owned it. Welcome to the channel. If this story connects with you, remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful narratives. We're curious, where are you watching from? Share in the comments. This story blends fictional elements with real-world themes for impact and reflection. Names may be imagined, but the lessons about loyalty, strategy, and family come from genuine human experience. On a Thursday afternoon in October, I saw my son sitting on a park bench with everything he owned packed into 3 suitcases. Bryant Park. Late afternoon. Evan was hunched forward, shoulders pulled inward, 3 suitcases beside him, while Lucas, my 4-year-old grandson, kicked fallen leaves, his light-up sneakers blinking with every step. I pulled over quickly. Evan didn't look up until my shadow crossed him. His eyes were red, exhaustion mixed with something deeper. Defeat. "Dad." Lucas ran to me and grabbed my hand. "Grandpa, can you fix this?" I looked at my son. "Why aren't you at the office?" Evan's jaw tightened. "Fired this morning. Richard said our blood doesn't belong with theirs." The words hung in the cold air. 3 years of Sunday dinners. 3 years of listening to Richard Hale explain the difference between old money and new, between people who belonged and people who didn't. I'd cataloged every insult. This crossed a line. "Get in the car." "I don't have anywhere to go." Emily changed the locks. "Put my things outside while I was being fired." His voice cracked. "She said her father made the right call." Lucas tugged my sleeve. "Mommy says you're the strongest man in New York." I knelt to his level. "I can fix it, buddy. I promise." I lifted 2 suitcases and nodded to Mark, my head of security. "Help Evan." We drove north in silence. Evan sat in the back with Lucas, who fell asleep almost immediately. I watched them in the mirror, my son, who looked like he'd aged 10 years in a single morning, and my grandson, who still believed grandfathers could fix anything. The Manhattan skyline faded into bridges, then autumn trees. "I built Harborline Maritime over 30 years," I said. "Started with 1 truck. It clears 800 million annually now." Evan already knew this, but I needed to say it. 3 years ago, I bought Riverside Freight for 20 million through offshore structures that keep the real owner invisible. I paused. I put Richard in as CEO. Evan's eyes sharpened in the mirror. "You came to me that day and said you wanted respect for who you are, not whose son you are." I agreed not to interfere. "Our deal." He nodded. "You kept it. For 3 years, I watched you endure things that would have broken most men. I listened to Richard explain why everything about you was insufficient." My hands tightened on the wheel. "I said nothing because we had an agreement." Lucas stirred. "But Richard doesn't know something." My voice dropped. Riverside Freight never belonged to him. It never did. Every paycheck he signed, every insult, inside a company I own. Silence. Then, "You've owned it the whole time?" "Yes." "Why put me through that?" "Because you asked me to. You needed to know you could stand on your own." I met his eyes in the mirror. "But that deal ended when I saw you on that bench." The Bedford gates came into view, iron and stone. Home. "What are you going to do?" I smiled. Not warmly. The smile I used before closing deals that left the other side with nothing. Richard wanted to play games with bloodlines. Now he'd learned something. In my world, bloodlines mean nothing. Only power does. And he'd just started a conflict with the wrong family. Evan didn't know I'd been paying Richard's salary the entire time. Didn't know I could take everything back with a single call. Didn't know I'd been collecting every slight like a prosecutor, building a case. But he was about to find out. The reckoning had begun. Every Sunday for 3 years, I swallowed insults with expensive wine and gathered ammunition. While Evan settled Lucas upstairs for the night, I sat in my study and let my thoughts drift back to those weekly rituals at the Hale estate, Greenwich, white columns, manicured hedges, a dining room with crystal chandeliers, and a table meant for 12 but rarely seating more than 5. Richard at the head, Emily beside him, scrolling her phone, Evan across from her, shoulders tense. And me at the far end, close enough to witness everything, distant enough to be dismissed. That first Sunday, 3 years ago, Richard picked up Evan's wine glass and slid it 2 inches to the left. Like this, he said, using that tone wealthy men adopt when pretending to help. Vintage Bordeaux is held with respect. By the stem, Evan, never the bowl. Details reveal breeding or the lack of it. Evan's face flushed. Yes, sir. Emily didn't look up. She never defended him, not once in 3 years. I cut my duck with precision and said nothing. Every week brought another correction, posture, tie choice, state school education compared to Richard's Yale degree, constant remarks about how some people simply didn't grasp the nuances of high society. 3 years of watching my son's light dim. But I had promised not to interfere, so I observed, memorized, and built my case. 6 months ago, something changed. Riverside Freight's quarterly reports started arriving late. In logistics, that's an eternity. When I called accounting, I heard stuttering excuses about system upgrades. I didn't buy it. 3 months later, Emily stopped taking my calls. Before, she kept up appearances, hoping for expensive gifts. Now it was always voicemail, events, travel, rest. A wall had gone up overnight. The moment I knew it was serious came a week ago. Evan visited my office at One World Trade Center. He looked awful. Gaunt, dark circles, suit hanging loose. He'd lost weight. Just busy, he said. Quarter end close. I knew quarter end didn't crush a man like that. Then I noticed his wrist. The platinum Daytona I'd given him for his 30th birthday, worth $50,000, was gone. Where's your watch? He pulled his sleeve down too fast. At the jeweler. Clasp issue. The lie sat between us. I'd bought that watch. The clasp had never been loose. Evan was meticulous with his possessions, almost obsessively. That meant one thing. He'd sold or pawned it. No man pawns a $50,000 watch unless desperate. After Evan left, I called Mark Morrison. Complete audit of Riverside Freight. Every transaction for 6 months. Find out what's happening at the Hale residence. Understood, Mr. Sullivan, Mark replied quietly. Within 24 hours, Mark returned with information that would change everything. But this was hours before I'd see Evan on the park bench. The warning signs had been there all along. Delayed reports, avoided calls, the missing watch, Richard's growing confidence, like a man who believed he'd gotten away with something. He had no idea I had been watching, waiting, that every insult, slight, and smug remark had been building towards something he couldn't imagine. The truth would demand a price. That evening, Mark walked into my study, carrying a black folder. Black meant urgent. You need to see this, Mr. Sullivan. I was already seated. He placed it on my desk and opened it without ceremony. Page 1. Police report filed today, just hours after Evan was terminated. Complainant, Richard Hale. Allegation, Evan Sullivan removed valuable family heirlooms. Antique coins, sterling silver jewelry, estimated value $2.8 million. He had filed it while Evan sat on that park bench, I noted quietly. Yes, sir. Wanted him arrested before he could defend himself, Mark said. Page 2 made my jaw tighten. Credit report. 12 separate loans from different banks over 6 months. Total, $18 million. All in Evan's name, but not his signatures. A handwriting expert confirmed it. High-quality digital forgeries using Evan's real signature copied from company documents. Collateral agreements listed Riverside Freight as guarantor, Evan's personal assets as secondary security. When the loans defaulted, the banks would destroy everything. The company would collapse. Evan would be personally liable for $18 million he never borrowed. They were building a trap. I said, bankrupt the company. Blame Evan. Let criminal charges follow. He goes to prison while they walk away clean. That's our assessment. Mark pulled out a tablet and pressed play. The video showed Evan and Emily's bedroom camera, hidden. Emily's voice sweet, but venom beneath it. You're so tense lately, Evan. Maybe you should see someone. You're becoming aggressive. You're scaring Lucas. I'm not aggressive, I'm just tired. See? You're yelling. You're unstable. The video cut. Another clip showed Emily breaking a vase. Why did you do that? Lucas, go to your room. Daddy's having another episode. She was building a custody case, Mark explained. These videos would be shown to a judge as proof Evan was dangerous, mentally unstable. She'd get full custody. He'd get supervised visitation at best. I closed my eyes briefly, controlling the cold fury building in my chest. One more thing, Mark said softly. The worst part. He laid down a document I recognized instantly. A pledge agreement. My international shipping license number, authorizing Harborline Maritime to operate in every major eastern seaboard port. Contracts worth $400 million annually pledged as collateral for a $7.5 million loan from a Cayman Islands fund. How did they get a forged duplicate through a corrupt notary? The transfers were scheduled for tomorrow at noon. Through the window, I could see the main house. Evan was in the next room, putting Lucas to bed, completely unaware his life was being systematically dismantled. Block that transfer, I said. Federal Reserve, Treasury, whoever you need. That money doesn't move. Understood? And Mark, get me everything on Richard Hale. Every loan, every account, every offshore entity, every secret. Mark nodded. He understood my tone. They tried to trap my son, I said quietly. Now I'm going to show them what a real trap looks like. After Mark left, I sat alone. In the next room, Evan's voice drifted through, reading Lucas a bedtime story. My grandson's sleepy laughter. They had tried to take that away from both of them. Richard and Emily Hale had made a critical miscalculation. They thought I was just a wealthy old man who'd sit quietly while they destroyed my family. They were about to learn the difference between having money and having power. The defense was over. Now came the reckoning. Predators hunt at night. So do I, but I hunt with balance sheets and wire transfers, weapons far deadlier than claws. At 8 Thursday evening, I stood in the shadows of Christie's Rockefeller Center showroom, surrounded by gilded frames and ancient sculptures worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. Richard Hale moved through the crowd like he owned the room. He didn't. I did. Or at least I owned the company that paid his salary. He stopped near a Basot sketch, checking his phone twice. A nervous man approached, mid-40s, leather jacket over designer jeans, gold Rolex catching the light. Tony Russo, a name Mark had flagged months ago for container theft and off-the-book shipping deals along the eastern seaboard. Mark's voice crackled softly in my earpiece. Target confirmed. Anthony Russo, 2 prior cargo theft convictions, 1 sealed, currently under federal watch. Richard extended his hand. Russo didn't shake it. Instead, he slid a small USB drive across the marble pedestal. 10 units, Russo said quietly. Mercedes Act 2023 models. Clean titles, offshore registration, $85,000 each. I felt my jaw tighten. 10 trucks meant $850,000 moving under the table using Riverside Freight's licenses and infrastructure. Richard pocketed the USB without looking. Tomorrow morning, Port of Newark, Pier 47, cash on delivery. Half up front, Russo countered, or the deal's off. Richard hesitated, then nodded. Fine. I raised my phone from 15 feet away and captured 3 clear photos. The handoff, Russo's face, Richard's hand on the USB. Mark, positioned near the champagne bar, had recorded the entire conversation. Captain Brooks is standing by, Mark murmured. He can intercept the shipment at dawn. No, I said softly, turning toward the exit. Let it play out. I want them both on record taking delivery. Then we move. Friday afternoon, I sat alone at a corner table in MoMA, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the sculpture garden. Emily arrived at 3 sharp, wearing a gray cashmere cardigan and oversized sunglasses she didn't remove indoors. She slid into the chair across from me and let out a long, theatrical sigh. This has been so difficult for me, she said, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Nathan's behavior. I never imagined he'd become so unstable. I said nothing, just watched. I want this resolved quietly, she continued, for Lucas's sake. What do you want, Emily? I asked. She leaned forward. The Tribeca penthouse, $4.5 million, sign it over to me, and I'll withdraw the charges. Evan can go free. I let the silence stretch, watching her mask slip, revealing the hunger beneath the grief. That's my home, I said, voice edged with caution. It's all I have left. Then you'll lose your son too, she said coldly, placing a document on the table. This is a donation agreement, not a settlement. No lawyers, no records, just a generous gift from a father-in-law who cares. Extortion wrapped in legalese. I reached for the paper, tracing my finger along the edge. The microphone hidden in my collar recorded every word. I'll need time. You have until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Emily interrupted, standing abruptly. The notary is waiting. Don't be late. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked away, shoulders back, already victorious. Mark's voice returned in my earpiece as the restaurant door closed. Got every word: extortion, coercion, and conspiracy. I dialed James Thornton at Manhattan Capital. By tomorrow morning, acquire every debt Charles Hale has. I want control of his life. While Emily waited at a notary I'd never contacted, I had other plans for Saturday. There's a moment in every war when you stop defending and start conquering. Mine arrived at 10 a.m. James sat across from me on the 47th floor of Manhattan Capital Bank, a stack of contracts between us that would dismantle Richard Hale's empire. Purchasing distressed debt in this volume is highly unusual, James said, adjusting his glasses. The risk is mine, I interrupted. This isn't an investment, it's a tool. He slid the first contract forward. Greenwich Estate Mortgage, $3.2 million outstanding. I signed without reading. Vehicle loans, Bentley Continental and Range Rover Autobiography, $480,000 combined. Signed. Mrs. Hale's credit cards, 7 accounts, nearly $200,000 total. I paused, imagining Emily's face when her black card declined. Then I signed. James continued with Riverside Freight's business lines, $12 million in overdraft facilities. If they default, you can seize everything. The company, their home, their assets. Perfect. I signed 3 times. Mr. Sullivan, what exactly are you planning? Justice. By the time we finished, $35 million in debt had transferred to Sullivan Maritime Holdings. More valuable than money? Control. At noon, I called from my car. James, freeze all accounts tied to Richard Hale. Effective immediately. I'm the primary creditor. Do it. 15 minutes later, confirmation arrived. Account blocked. Reason, internal security review. Contact creditor. I pictured Richard seeing that message, the floor shifting beneath him. At 2 p.m., Mark called. The Cayman transfer is flagged. $7.5 million. Federal Reserve froze it pending review for anti-money laundering. How long? Months, maybe years. The shipping license he pledged illegally stays exactly where it belongs, with you and the plaza. Tech team ready, video evidence loaded, waiting for your signal. Evan was safe at Bedford with Lucas, unaware of the timeline. Keep it that way, I reminded Mark. By 5 p.m., I stood in a private suite at the plaza, looking down at Fifth Avenue as twilight settled over Manhattan. Mark reviewed final details beside me. We're ready, Mr. Sullivan. I straightened my tie and checked my watch. Somewhere across town, Richard Hale was rehearsing his acceptance speech, basking in an award he thought would cement his legacy. He had no idea I'd already taken his crown. Charles is preparing for his coronation, I said. He doesn't realize the throne is already empty. Mark nodded. Ballroom opens at 7. 300 guests confirmed. Everyone will be watching. I turned from the window. Good. Let them watch. By 7:00, I would walk into that ballroom, and Richard Hale's world would end, not quietly, but with a reckoning. The plaza ballroom glittered like a jewelry box, perfect for shattering illusions. Behind velvet curtains, I watched 300 of Manhattan's elite settle into their seats. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light across silk gowns and tailored tuxedos. Everything gleamed with old money and false respectability. Richard stood near the center in a midnight blue Tom Ford tuxedo, accepting shallow congratulations. Emily positioned herself beside him in crimson, her smile frozen. Something was wrong. Guests whispered after greeting him, eyebrows raised, phones discreetly checked. News traveled fast in circles this small. At 7:55, his phone buzzed. I watched him pull it out, completely still, face drained. He tapped the screen repeatedly. Account suspended. Reason: anti-money laundering review. Action required. New creditor. He tried another account. Error. 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 Emily leaned toward him, still smiling for the crowd. What's wrong? Richard showed her the phone. Her smile vanished. My cards, she whispered, pulling out her own phone. They're all declined. Caterer payment bounced. He scanned the room, seeking allies. Eyes that had welcomed him for decades now looked away. One by one, his network dissolved. He straightened his bow tie, forced shoulders back, tried the expression of control, but his hands trembled. At exactly 8:09, lights dimmed. The master of ceremonies took the stage, practicing a smile. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to present this year's Entrepreneur of the Year award to Mr. Richard Hale. Polite, scattered applause rippled through the ballroom. Richard walked toward the stage, each step heavier than the last. Spotlight followed, harsh and unforgiving. Sweat gleamed on his forehead. He grasped the microphone, opened his mouth, and the LED screen behind him blazed to life. Instead of the Riverside Freight logo, Emily's voice rang crystal clear. The old fool fell for it. The penthouse is ours. Richard spun toward the screen, face contorting in horror, his own voice recorded 3 days earlier. What about Evan? Emily's cold laugh. Let him rot in prison. He needs to learn his place. Gasps erupted through the ballroom. Phones rose to capture what came next. Documents appeared. Bank records, forged signatures, offshore transfers. Each stamped boldly. Forgery, extortion, fraud. Richard froze at the podium, mouth opening and closing soundlessly, his empire collapsing in real time. From behind the curtain, I stepped forward. There is a particular silence when 300 people realize they've witnessed the performance of lies. That silence is justice. The LED screen continued its revelations. Text messages between my son's father-in-law and his daughter. Forged bank reports, wire transfer orders to offshore accounts. Each document stamped in bold red, forgery, extortion, fraud. He gripped the podium, knuckles white. This is lies, fabricated security. Remove this. The security guards didn't move. They worked for the plaza, whose contract had been purchased by Sullivan Maritime 3 hours earlier. A spotlight swung toward my private box. I stepped forward, descending the stairs. 300 faces turned. My footsteps echoed in the silence. Good evening. I walked onto the stage, standing beside him. Up close, panic flooded his eyes, sweat soaking through his collar. He turned to the audience desperately. I am a man of standing. This commoner envies the class we represent. No one spoke. No one defended him. I addressed the room calmly. This commoner built the houses you live in, shipped the goods that made your fortunes, and yes, paid for that tuxedo he's wearing. I placed 3 folders on the podium. Folder 1, Liquidation Notice. Riverside Freight belongs to me. It always has. Purchased through an offshore holding 3 years ago. He had been my employee, drawing a salary I provided while he tormented my son. His mouth opened. No sound. Folder 2, Lease Termination. The land beneath his estate, also mine. Stealing from your landlord is remarkably unwise. His legs buckled slightly. Folder 3. The district attorney now has copies of every forged signature, every fraudulent loan, every illegal wire transfer. You wanted to put my son in prison on false charges. I leaned closer. Welcome to your own cage. He collapsed slowly, defeated, onto the stage floor. Midnight blue tuxedo crumpled. His daughter screamed, launching herself from the front row, hands like claws. Frank Morrison intercepted her midway, catching her wrists. Let me go, Daddy. Do something. Her father didn't move, didn't look up. Frank produced an envelope. Eviction notice. Police are at the estate now. 2 hours to collect personal items, all jewelry and valuables sealed as evidence. Her screams dissolved into sobs. I turned to the ballroom one last time. Check your pockets when you're around people like this. You never know what might go missing. My son waited at the entrance. Mason's with the nanny at Bedford, he said softly. We walked out together while security lifted the broken man from the floor and his daughter swung her designer purse uselessly at Frank's shoulder. Outside, NYPD detectives were waiting in the lobby, federal warrants in hand. They arrested him immediately, 5 charges. His daughter faced civil conspiracy and extortion consequences. No handcuffs for her, but consequences nonetheless. I didn't feel triumph, just exhausted relief. The predators were caged. Now came the healing. If you've stayed with me through this journey, the humiliation, the strategy, the reckoning, leave a comment. Would you have done the same to protect your family? Some details have been dramatized. Not everything unfolded exactly as described. If you prefer, you can remember tonight's justice as the ending. But if you want to know what happened to Richard, Emily, and how my son rebuilt his life, stay with me a little longer. 2 weeks can feel like 2 years when your world collapses. Every minute for them was eternity. He was processed that night. Federal agents took him directly from the plaza to detention. 5 charges: forgery, embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, criminal conspiracy. Each carried years. Now he sat in a 6x6 cell, staring at concrete walls. Lawyers abandoned him when accounts froze. No money, no defense. The man who once commanded boardrooms now commanded nothing but a metal toilet and a narrow window. The orange jumpsuit hung loose. He'd lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. The Tom Ford tuxedo was gone, seized as evidence. Hours passed with his eyes on the slice of gray sky, replaying the plaza ballroom, the screen, the gasps, the collapse of everything built on lies. The name that once opened doors now whispered like a disease. She wasn't arrested that night. Her crimes were primarily civil, conspiracy and extortion attempts, serious, but not federal. The district attorney offered a deal: cooperate, forfeit assets, 5 years probation. She took it. Her life reduced to a 400-square-foot studio in Queens, the first place she ever rented herself. At 32, she learned laundry, cooking, counting change while strangers sighed behind her. Her last Hermes bag listed on eBay: authentic, excellent condition, must sell. Rent due in 5 days. She called her father twice on a borrowed phone. Both went to voicemail. He couldn't help, from a cell, nor himself. Karma arrived in its purest form. My son returned to Riverside Freight as CEO, the position that should have always been his. $120 million in contracts, 43 employees, 5 major ports. First week back, he fired the purchasing manager who had taken bribes. Pack your desk, security will escort you out. The soft man who apologized for existing was gone. In his place, forged in fire, tempered by betrayal, hardened into steel. He balanced CEO duties with being a full-time father to Mason, morning preschool drop-offs, evening bedtime stories, weekend soccer in Riverside Park. I watched him meet with suppliers, firm but fair, demanding excellence without cruelty. Employees who mocked him now avoided his eyes. "Is there a problem?" he asked one. "No, sir," the man stammered. I stood in the observation room, watching my son command respect he had earned through survival. Frank appeared beside me. "He's ready, sir, more than ready." "I know." I turned from the window. One more place to go, the park bench in Manhattan where everything changed. I needed to sit there again, not as a warrior, but as a grandfather. Same bench, same autumn leaves. But the man sitting there was different, lighter, freer, at peace. No suitcases, no desperation, just Mason chasing pigeons across the plaza, arms stretched wide like wings, laughter ringing clear as bells. I poured coffee from a stainless steel thermos, simple, practical, nothing like the silver service I once valued. A woman pushing a stroller passed by. Our eyes met. Genuine smiles, the kind strangers share. When the world feels briefly kind, I realized something. Then I could finally shed the iron mask I'd worn for 30 years. The mask of the empire builder, strategist, the man who turned shipping routes into fortunes and never let anyone see him bleed. It was gone. I could breathe. I hadn't just saved my son. I'd given him something more valuable than Riverside Freight, more lasting than any balance sheet, a legacy of dignity, the kind protected every single day, in every decision, in how you treat people when no one's watching. Richard Hale had believed lineage mattered most. Breeding, bloodlines, the right last name on the right documents. He was wrong. Character matters, loyalty, love, the things you can't inherit, only earn. 30 years building Sullivan Maritime into an $800 million operation. 43 vessels, 5 major ports, contracts spanning 3 continents. It took only 2 weeks to build something more valuable, a complete family. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Nathan, 7 years old, standing at the doorway of my study, in his Little League uniform. "Dad, will you come to my game? I'm pitching." I glanced up from a contract negotiation, barely registering his face. "Not today, son. Maybe next time." So many next times missed. I couldn't get those years back, but I could fix the mistake going forward, one generation at a time. "Grandpa?" Mason came running, flushed with happiness, clutching a rubber ball he'd found near the fountain. "Watch this." He wound up like a major league pitcher and threw. The ball sailed in a wobbly arc. I caught it cleanly. "Good throw, champ," I said, standing. "Want to practice more?" "Yes." His eyes lit up. "Dad said you'd teach me baseball." I smiled. Not the calculated boardroom smile, a real one. "Then let's practice." We spent 20 minutes throwing the ball back and forth. I showed him the grip, the follow-through, aiming for the center of my chest. He missed more than he caught, but laughed each time. That mattered more than accuracy, fixing mistakes, one generation at a time. The sunset painted Bryant Park in orange and red. Office workers streamed past, heading to the subway. "Come on, Mason," I said, holding out my hand. "Let's go home. Your dad's waiting." His small fingers wrapped around mine, warm, trusting. We walked together across the plaza, past the fountain where tourists took photos, past chess tables where old men plotted endgames. At the edge of the park, I looked back one last time at the bench where everything changed, where my son had sat with 3 suitcases and a 4-year-old boy believing he'd lost everything, where I had decided that some things, family, dignity, love, were worth going to war for, where it all began and where healing could finally start. Sitting there now, I realized something important. Don't be like me. Don't wait 30 years to build an empire before you build a family. Don't let pride send your child into a den of wolves just to prove he can stand alone. I thought I was teaching Nathan strength. Instead, I almost lost him entirely. Grandpa's stories like mine, revenge, corporate warfare, they make compelling tales. But the best stories aren't about boardroom battles. They're about teaching a 4-year-old to throw a baseball, being there for bedtime, answering when a small voice asks, "Grandpa, can you fix this?" Real grandpa stories are written in presence, not power. God gave me 3 chances I didn't deserve. First, He preserved my son when I failed to protect him. Second, He gave me the resources to fight back when others had none. Third, He granted me Mason, a living reminder that legacy isn't measured in revenue, but relationships. The Bible asks, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" I gained Sullivan Maritime $800 million annual revenue, but nearly lost what mattered most. Family stories shouldn't be about courtroom victories or financial takedowns. The stories worth passing down are about showing up, choosing a child's baseball game over another contract, holding a grandson's hand instead of a meeting. These stories echo through generations, not for drama, but truth. If you face betrayal by in-laws, business partners, or those you trust, remember, justice matters, dignity matters. But don't let the fight consume you so completely that you forget what you're fighting for. God didn't put us on earth to destroy enemies. He put us here to love our families, to stand for what's right, to pass down something better than wealth. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's living well, loving deeply, finally coming home. Mason's waiting. We have baseball to practice. Thank you for listening to an old man's story. Final note. This content includes dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the core lessons, recognizing financial and emotional abuse, are real. If this style doesn't resonate, seek content better suited to your needs.